Kirk, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. I'm really good. Thanks for having me on.
No worries at all. So first of all, just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, if
Sure.
that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Well, my name's Kirk Ward. I am the CEO and founder of a communications consultancy called Clearview. But before that, way before that, I trained in the NHS as a physiotherapist. Um, then, just as I qualified, the NHS was going through one of its regular top-down reorganisations. So I decided to bin that off, and I retrained as a journalist. And I spent 10 years, maybe a little bit more, working in national, local, regional newspapers, which was a lot of fun, but also was an industry going through a big period of change, still is. And so I sort of fell into a job working in central London, doing media and political engagement. And that's how I found my way into comms. And that started a long, felt very long career in NHS communications. I did 12 years working in London in national NHS roles and also working in Sussex and on the Isle of Wight for NHS providers. So I feel like I've had a long and storied career with the NHS. So it was
Make it sound like a jail
for a
sentence.
change. Yeah, longer than
I did 12 years.
yeah, and I just about made it out in one piece.
Do you ever miss like clinical practice? Because that's quite a difference jumping from physiotherapy into the world of media and journalism.
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a lot actually. I do miss it. Every now and then I get the opportunity to kind of give advice on sprained ankles and things because my family haven't forgotten that I'm a physio. But when I thought about it, there's so many skills um, that are part of being a good physiotherapist that are common to being a good journalist and to being a good communicator. So in physiotherapy, you're sussing out the patient even before you talk to them. Like you're checking their gait as they walk um, into the treatment room. You're trying to build rapport with them to understand what's motivating them, what's stopping them doing certain things, and by and large, you're trying to convince them to do stuff that maybe they don't want to do, like a bunch of rehabilitative exercises for their knee, and you've got to find ways to influence their behaviour, and that's the same as being a journalist. You've got to build rapport quickly. You have to find ways to get people who may be reluctant to talk to you to open up and explain how something feels or what's happened. And those skills really put me in a pretty strong position, I think, to move into the world of comms. And when I think about how I work now as a consultant, I'm still using those skills that the physiotherapy student version of Kirk learned all those years ago. It's you walk into a room, there's people you've never met there. You've got to figure out quickly what the dynamics are. You've got to understand what's causing people discomfort and what the problems are so that you can offer sensible solutions. And the solution may not be something that they necessarily want to do or would enjoy. So you kind of still have to have those influencing skills. So it might seem like I kind of hopped all over the place in the last 20 years, but I think there's a thread there. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
There's an underlying message there in terms of how just because you pick one career pathway doesn't mean you need to stay on that trajectory, and it might actually navigate naturally into a different one. And that change is actually quite positive.
Oh,
So I think
definitely, and we're seeing that more and more, aren't we? In the new entrants into the workplace, that they seem much more open to chopping and changing than perhaps people of my generation or older people, where you can they kind of park themselves in a lane and they chug along. And I don't know whether it's partly to do with the type of brain I've got, but I struggle to, if I feel like I'm in a bit of an annual cycle where you're doing the same things each
Rinse
year.
and repeat.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I thrive on novelty. So
Yeah.
it makes sense for me to, really get into a job role or a type of work, and then take the stuff that I've learned from that and apply it somewhere else where the environment's different and the context is different.
Yeah.
But I'm using the same muscles that I've been training my whole career.
I think that's one of the highlights of the NHS as well, because it's almost like its own community, because you are surrounded by so many different professions and all of these sorts of aspects of life, and it all comes together cohesively. So I think actually having 12 years in the NHS is invaluable as well.
Well, yeah, thank you. The last few years were pretty hard, not going to lie, but it is a fantastic environment to work in. Every day, it's a kind of slightly trite expression, but every day is different. You could, when I was working on the Isle of Wight, for example, the NHS trust there was providing hospital services, mental health services, an ambulance service, and community services. So on any given day, I could be doing anything, working on anything that the NHS across the country does.
Yeah.
So I really really love that, and I think that's true wherever you work in the NHS. There's always something new going on. The only constant is that things are changing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you're built like that, then I definitely recommend it.
Yeah. I think, I mean, communications is all about variety. We never know what's coming in, do we?
No.
But I don't know if this is the same for you, but I think um, communications is one of those professions where you need to have such a broad overview of everything, and you're always thinking about the implications of your communications and what it can do to the reputation of the organization, which is why I think it's really important that comms has a seat at the table. And sometimes it can be seen as more of an afterthought, as we've done all the planning in this closed room, now we'll just give it to comms and they'll push it out for us.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that sort of similar experience, or what do you think?
I think you're exactly right. I've experienced both ends of that particular spectrum. I've worked in organisations where comms was a delivery function and not included in strategic discussions, and so would be given stuff to send out, and invariably that does not deliver what the organisation needs. And I've worked in organisations where I've been a member of the board, where comms has been involved in big decisions right from the very beginning, and invariably things went better. That's my anecdotal evidence, but I see it in all of the clients that we work with at Clearview, whether that's public sector, private sector, charities. The ones that are the most effective as organisations have a couple of things in common. One of them is that comms is a strategic partner in the decisions that the organisation takes.
Mhm.
It just leads to better decisions, and even if the decisions aren't ideal, like a response to a crisis, or funding's changing, and the organisation has to do things it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable about, if comms are involved from the beginning, that stuff lands better. And that's my experience. That's the experience that my colleagues at Clearview have, and I know what it's like for comms professionals to be on the other end of that spectrum when they're finding out about things really late. They don't have the opportunity to influence it, and my experience is that things go badly when that happens.
They do. Now, you touched on crisis management, and that is a huge part of being a communications professional. And it's a bit of an odd one, because actually even a what can be perceived as a negative outcome could actually be a win for comms.
Mm.
It could have been so much worse. So again, it's about demonstrating how effective comms can work. But what do you think about crisis management, and what sort of challenges have you faced?
Oh, so over the years, I've worked on some really big um, crises. You know, on the outskirts of the NHS's response to things like Grenfell, the Manchester arena bombing, London Bridge terror attack, the COVID pandemic. I worked for a regulator during the mid staffs inquiry and special administration. So I've worked in and around some like pretty big crisis situations, and and I think you're right about how you handle a crisis is important for the kind of primary reputational threat, the thing that's happened. Are we managing it well? We'll look bad if we don't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but also, how you manage it can have a much longer term positive impact on your reputation as an organization. And doing simple things like bringing people into the discussion about how you're going to manage the crisis. I've seen so many organizations be threatened by something that's happening, and the exec team huddles, they decide what to do, they don't talk to anybody else in the organization, and then the organization is shocked when questions are asked in Parliament about something,
Yeah.
or the media covers something. When actually, if we were more trusting as senior leaders and we involved our people more, the positive impact of that would be building trust. That the people would naturally feel like, oh, something bad has happened, but they're talking to us about it, they're involving
Mm-hmm.
us in it, and therefore there's a way forward. And I've worked in organisations that with CEOs and other senior leaders who do that instinctively, and the benefit of that, even if you're responding to, a flurry of negative media stories, you're doing so in a way that reassures people in your organisation. It builds trust, and so the negative media story doesn't completely knock you off your axis. You can concentrate on doing the thing that your organisation is supposed to be doing, whether that's patient care or running trains or whatever it is, or selling products. That, but that's really difficult for senior people to balance their kind of natural risk aversion on and protecting their personal reputation on the one hand, and the reputation of the organisation, with relinquishing control and building trust by letting people know what's happening.
Yeah.
And you need to find a balance of the two, and good crisis comms. The professionals giving the advice are thinking beyond the actual crisis. They're thinking about how they can build trust in their organization, restore trust with the public, with customers, with patients. It's not just about the next 24 hours, it's about what happens after that. So yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's super important. And crisis comms, there's not an NHS comms person in the country that doesn't have crisis comms on their CV now, thanks to the pandemic, right? Because
That is so
we all
true.
had the biggest crisis going, and it lasted forever,
Yeah.
and all of that. But there's a difference, I think, between responding to a crisis and responding and communicating your way out of the crisis. And I think as a service, the NHS by and large did that quite well. Other sectors of the economy didn't do it so well. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and you touched on it. You said the word trust, and I think that you are absolutely spot on, because communications is often like the bridge between sort of the senior and the executive board and those that are on the shop floor. And you have to have trust from both sides. You have to have trust from your employees so that they know that what you're telling them is the truth, and they have that trust that you are going to help them through those sorts of situations. But also the executive board have to trust you so that they can show a bit of vulnerability and not just, pretend that everything's okay, and actually show that side to them as well. So it goes back to our point that, if we're in the boardroom helping with those strategic decisions, that trust will build and that connection will amplify. So it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And all too often it's overlooked. And there's something in what you just said about authenticity as well. Senior leaders, in my experience, are often quite concerned that they need to look and seem like they have the answers.
Yeah.
And because, to justify being paid more than everybody else. And to a degree, that is true. You want your finance director to be all over the money, and you want your nursing director to, understand how nursing works. They have to be experts, but also, and the best CEOs that I've ever worked with were able to say, I don't know, or even better, we got that wrong.
Yes.
We got that wrong. How can we do it better next time? Like, what do you think? They're really small phrases, but they're incredibly powerful, and they showing that vulnerability, as you said, being your authentic self, and showing that you don't necessarily always have to have the answers, goes such a long way to building trust, which is, as you say, super important.
Yeah, it really does. And I always talk about sort of having connections with someone, particularly in times of stress. It's really easy to blame someone or dislike someone when they are just a title. But actually, if you've made that connection with them and you've built that working relationship with them, you're more likely to actually work together through times of stress. So yeah, transparency is everything, and trust. I think it's maybe not easier, but it's definitely more manageable to build that within an organization. But how do you go about building that with public perception?
Um, yeah, so that's a really good question, and I wish I had a pithy answer for it. But the honest truth is that it takes a lot of work and it takes a long time. I've been lucky enough to have some really brilliant jobs in NHS comms, but it wasn't guaranteed that they would turn out that way. I've been appointed into some very challenged organisations where the quality of care was poor, the financial management was poor, and the public's perception of those organisations was that they were failing. And one thing that I've done a number of times is to switch the comms focus from kind of traditional reputation management through the media, through social media, and turn it to staff engagement. And I know your question was about trust in from the public, but I'll get there. Hang on. And by focusing on staff, if your organization is, say, 5,000 people in a local community of a couple of 100,000, if you can turn your 5,000 staff members into advocates for your organization, if they can tell a story about your organization, recognizing the failures, working to improve them, and valuing staff and patients, that will ripple outwards in a much more powerful way than 3 press releases a week to the local media. You can still do that because that's bread and butter stuff. But if you're actually throwing time and money and energy at creating that advocacy in your own organization, that member of staff who feels valued will talk to their family, who will talk to their friends, who will talk to people they know at church, at the rugby club, but down the shops. And that's how you, and that's what your brand is. It's not the font you use or the colors on your social media banner images. It's what people say about you when you're not around. And that's how we've the teams I've led have built public trust when there's been a problem and the organisation has had to turn things around. So that's probably what I would do.
That sounds like the perfect answer to me. And I am all
Thank you.
for staff engagement and looking after your staff. You look after your staff and they look after their patients. It's brilliant. One thing about communications is we're quite data sort of driven, but comms is quite hard to measure the effectiveness. So what sort of tools do you use? How do you go about measuring the impact of your
Oh yeah,
communications?
I mean that's a really big question. That's some of the work we're doing with Clearview is we've pulled together a range of like tools and resources and content for people to cover a whole framework of strategic communications. And I won't go into all of it, but one of the pillars is measurement and evaluation. And comms is a data-rich environment, and if you spend enough time on it, you can find data that says that your team's doing a good job. But I don't believe that measuring things like engagement or reach, or the Barcelona principles to calculate the PR value of earned media. I think that's just more data, and data are pieces of a puzzle. And what we focus on with the work we do at Clearview is to help people turn data into information. So they start putting those pieces together to build an accurate picture of what's going on. And then over time, you'll be able to turn that information into insight. So you're taking decisions based on evidence that's grown over time, that's based on your data, but isn't just about things like reach and website traffic and other kind of singular metrics like that. If I had to pick a single metric, it would be share of voice, because I think that provides a more rounded picture of how an organization is reaching people. It takes into account competitor analysis. It takes into account the sentiment of discussions about the brand. So that's one we recommend with clients. But I think the fundamental point of measurement in evaluation is not just about comms teams patting one another on the back for a campaign well run. If you've planned the campaign properly, there's some sort of business objective. You need to increase flu vaccine uptake by 10%. You want to increase the response rate to the staff survey by 10%. Whatever it is, and that those are the things that we should be measured against. And the rest of it, the data that builds up the picture for how successful we were, while it is reassuring to a comms director, I'm not so sure the board of an organization really cares. They want to know that 10% more people got their flu jabs. So when I'm running campaigns or working with organizations, I want to know what the business objective is. Like, how many courses do you need to sell? How many more visitors do you want to the theme park? Like, it could be anything. And comms has to work to that. And that's how you measure whether you're successful. If you can show that, we've improved the uptake of this public health measure. And that's fundamentally, that's why comms people do what they do, because they want to help make things better.
Different.
Yeah,
I agree. And I do think there is a place for metrics like website traffic and things like that, but you have to delve down deeper than that. That just pinpoints you to an area that you might need to pay attention to. So I think there is a place for it, but you're absolutely right. You have to then delve deeper and say, okay, why are so many people landing on this page? Is it that they're not given enough information when they receive their letter or something like that? And then you start to sort of build the picture, the bigger picture, to make an impact later down the line. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like a loose connection when you work in comms because it's not black and white.
Mm.
There's so many pieces going. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a really difficult thing to measure, but everything is data. It doesn't have to be facts, figures, and numbers. Having a conversation with someone, you're collecting data from them.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I think we're going to see. I think we've already started to see it. Some of my former comms director colleagues in the NHS are already saying that face to face, real world engagement events are sort of back in a big way, and they're
Mm,
seeing a lot more people choosing to engage with services in that way. So,
yeah.
that's another challenge. How do you turn that into? How do you tell a story of that engagement, and how are you capturing what people tell you about their services or what they need?
Mm.
And that's great because that all disappeared, didn't it, for a few years? So it's good to see that people are getting back together and talking about improving services face to face.
Yeah, I agree with you. But actually, what we can do is take some of the things that we learned when we were living in a completely digital world and help us when we transition back into face to face. We can use some of those tools. And I think we are, with the use of AI and all of that, we're having to change the way that we work. So, what do you think has changed over your 12 plus years in comms? And what do you see changing
Whew.
imminently?
So I've been in the game so long that I remember being on call and having to go and buy all of the national newspapers and having to read them all,
Yes.
see,
Yeah.
and having to like
If you were there.
do the actual clippings. So like a lot has changed. You don't need to do any of that, not any of that nonsense anymore. So when I think about things like AI changing the way we work, I'm like, absolutely, bring it in. Get it improving comms workflows and processes as quickly as we can, safely too. But I think the biggest change that I've seen in my comms career has not been about the technology. It's been about the people. So I think that the years of austerity bled into the pandemic, and we're still feeling the impact of both of those
Mhm.
things. And it is just a fact that people are more tired, more stressed, less engaged in the public sector by and large. And so the job of your everyday comms team has just progressively got more and more difficult. Now that's been tempered by things making life more a little easier, like the technology um, and the improvement in the profile of our profession. That's all helped, but fundamentally, it is so much harder to get people engaged with what an organisation is doing today than it
Yeah.
was 15 years ago. And I think that's probably been the thing that I've had to wrestle with the most during my career so far.
Why do you think that is?
Um, I suppose it goes back. It takes me right back to being a physiotherapy student. There's You don't know the issues around that patient has. They've got a bad leg. They come in, you're telling them to do exercises because it'll help, and they're not doing it, and they don't show up to the next appointment, and they're disengaged, um, and you have very little control over the other influences in that person's life. You've got this short
Yeah.
window where you're engaging with them, and you want to be upbeat, and you want to be positive and inspiring and engaging. But if the mood music in that person's professional life, just to extend the metaphor to almost breaking point, is is so bad and has been bad for a very long time, the odds that they're going to take action as a result of a survey or an engaging piece of content or an all-staff briefing gets lower and lower over time. And I think that's really difficult. I saw a bit of a reversal of that during the pandemic, and that wasn't because people's jobs got easier; they got harder, far harder. But there was definitely a shared sense of purpose, and organizations like the ones I worked in were suddenly alive to the fact that people are going above and beyond every day. We need to say thank you. What can we do? We ran a big campaign called the Great Big Thank You and touched thousands of people in our organization, not just in the NHS, in the local authority too, and other key workers. And would our organizations doing stuff like that now? I don't think so. But we were able to pull together. We realized how valuable everybody's contribution was during that prolonged crisis. So I just think, I'm hopeful that reforms in the public sector will ease some of that pressure, and that people will adapt to change and will be able to engage in kind of the next evolution of the NHS in a positive way. But that's definitely been a challenge. Definitely over the last 5 years, I would say that's been more and more evident.
Yeah, and I think an overload of information as well. So you touched on it earlier where you said, you had to go buy the paper, read the paper, do the cuttings so that you've got a history of when we're being spoken about. But you had to actively seek out information. And now, I mean, it's just an overload, isn't it? We've got information everywhere. It's constantly there on our phones. We've got social media with people just having their opinions and talking. So actually, how do you make yours stand out? Because it is just an overload and it's too much. And people do sometimes just shut off because they can't actually absorb any more. So I think that has a big part to play in it as well.
For sure. And at the same time as we're competing to get our messages to people, we're also telling them, make sure you switch your phone off at night, work-life balance. so it's like, well, which is it? We desperately need you to know all of this stuff, but don't be checking your emails at a weekend.
Exactly that. Yeah. Like you say, if you had the perfect balance of comms to deliver to everyone, we'd all be on it straight away. So given that it is such a challenge at the moment, what piece of advice would you give to comms professionals or those looking for a career in comms? What would you say?
I think the thing that's helped me most in my career has just been curiosity. So that might have been when I was a press officer and just starting out and having the curiosity to rock up to different meetings just to see what was going on instead of waiting at my desk for somebody to say we need a press release, to as a more senior comms professional having the curiosity to keep asking questions, to really understand what's going on for somebody, to find out what's motivating them or what's causing them not to act. Curiosity has helped in so many ways. In the teams that I've led, where we've been innovative and where we've had success, it's often come from someone just asking the question, "Oh, couldn't we do it like this?" And I think that's something that good comms people have in spades, that they have that natural curiosity that, oh, we could just try it and see what happens, and it might work and brilliant, we'll do it again, or it might not go so well, we'll adjust and go again, and things will improve. So I think always being curious, always being teachable, they're two things that have really helped me over my career. And then the final one is that I think storytelling is so important, and it speaks to all aspects of comms, from planning a strategy, from writing a strategy to planning a campaign, to writing your evaluation reports to just going to meet a colleague about some social media posts that you're going to do. Like being able to tell a story about who you are, why comms is important, how the person you're talking to is going to support a positive outcome, what that will mean for patients or the public, and being able to put that all together. I think that's really valuable too.
Thank you. That's really great advice. Stay curious. There's no such thing as a silly question in the world of comms.
Yeah, for sure.
And the ability to tell a story, I think that sums it up perfectly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. I've really actually enjoyed that conversation. It was
Oh,
really
thank you.